Yo, what's going on? Welcome to the 9 to 5 CEO podcast. I'm one half, Tramaine, a.k.a. the 9 to 5 landlord.
And I'm Zena, a.k.a. Zena Dixon Inc.
Okay, so today you guys are going to learn a little bit more about me as far as where I come from and just what led me to doing what I'm currently doing.
Right. So my first question, Tramaine, is what made you interested in getting into real estate?
I was working as an accountant. I always wanted to get into real estate, but it's something that kind of crossed my mind, but it was kind of in and out because you watch HGTV, right? So you see the flip and it's like, yo, in 3 weeks they just made 70 grand. Like I could do that. But I was working as an accountant and I actually was doing this, got taxes. And all my accountants know when you do taxes, you kind of have your W-2s, then you have your Schedule B, which is kind of your interest and dividends, and then you have your other income. But when we first started doing his taxes, he made like 13,000 with his W-2. He had about $350 in his interest and dividends. I'm like, okay, we charge a lot of money for his taxes. Why is he even going through us? He don't even make that much. And then I got to what's called the Schedule E, which is your rentals, your real estate rental income, and it was like 196,000. And
Wow.
when that happened, I'm like, whoa, shit, you know? So I ended up going to my manager and I'm like, yo, because to kind of give you a background, I'm a staff accountant. So I don't talk and interact with the clients, but at the same time, he does. So I'm like, yo, when you talk to these clients and you realize like, yo, they're not that much smarter than me. Do you ever think like, hey, I could do this too? And he hit me some back with an answer like, well, we're accountants and they're real estate people. And for that, it was like, you trying to tell me what I can't do? Like, I'm hard-headed to begin with. So it just made me push more towards doing it. And I kind of just began to binge watch podcasts from there.
That was such a hater move. What do you mean?
Oh, come on, man.
So let's take it back to your youth and how you grew up and like how did your family view money? Did they talk about investments? Did they talk about like, real estate?
Well, just the background, it was like today, it's like one of 19. When I was a kid, it was like one of 12. We all grew up in displaced homes. So I grew up with none of my siblings. I lived with my grandma. On my mama's side, my siblings lived in other homes across Milwaukee. But no, there wasn't really no talk about money. If anything, it was, do you got that kind of money? Like, I want some McDonald's. You got McDonald's money? I want the Jordans. You got Jordan money? So it was kind of one of them. So it kind of wasn't really talked about really at all, unless it was like dire need, like I need gas or I need food. That's the only time I got talked about.
So so what was it in your life? What event or person gave you a change of perspective in that regards? Because I feel like when you grow up in that environment, you won't know different until you see different or you're exposed to different. So what was your exposure?
Um, I hooped a lot in high school, but it was one time I got done hooping with my guys, Pierre and Twan, and they pops had picked this up, and for some reason on the way back we rode by Lake Drive. So if you're from Milwaukee, Lake Drive, that's kind of like the Beverly Hills of Milwaukee, where it's like those houses on the lake, they're like $2-3 million houses, and I'm seeing them, I'm like, yo, this is kind of crazy. And I'm like, who live here? And Twan and Pierre Pops was like, oh, well, business owners, like regular people that got a degree, they ain't nothing special, they ain't in the NBA. I'm like, damn, for real? He's like, yeah, ain't no NBA players stay on this block. All these
Wow.
business owners. I'm like, damn, word. So okay, so degree you said, right? Bachelor's, what's that, 4 years? So then that's kind of when my wheels start spinning, like, okay, let me actually think about going to college now.
So how were you in school? I know you as an athlete, but how were you in school and how did you
uh
say, I think I'm gonna go to college because I want to be like these businessmen?
the book stopped bouncing once the basketball did. So sophomore year, I got injured and I stopped hooping. And then after that, I got a job and I got used to have like money, because like once you get to that age and you don't grow up with those resources, you have to hustle to get the resources that everybody else already had. So if cap and gown is $300 and all this and that, I gotta go work for that at minimum wage. So I literally be leaving school early to go work a minimum wage job just to take care of my essential needs. But in that process, it kind of blurred my vision towards education, because I'm just like, I need money. Like, I'm getting money. I need this. I like this feeling. So the education kind of got put on the back burner for like my last couple of years of high school, which is why I kind of really wasn't really looking forward to college at that point.
Okay. Wow. That just brings back a memory about, when you go through these rite of passages like prom and stuff like that. At the time, my aunt was like, prom is not, she said, prom is a privilege, not a right. So if you want to go, you got to pay for it yourself. And I'm just like looking at girls going to prom on TV, and I'm like, their parents don't tell them that. But it's so true. Like, in our environment, those things are not essential. As long as I'm giving you a roof over your head and food in your belly, you should be good. And it's just like, but I want to be like the other kids. I want to have a cap and gown. I want to go to prom. And you do have to be like, let me go and get a job when you really might want to prioritize school or sports or something like that. So I totally get that. So you didn't really wasn't feeling school, but you made the leap to go to college. How did that happen?
The day before the first day, I ended up having to catch the bus to take the actual college exam. So I literally, like, remember those commercials that you would see where like the girl would be working like a hot dog stand and being like, I didn't get my degree and now I'm some. One of them
Yeah.
came on and I just got off of work. I'm like, yo, nah, like I'm not staying here. So I get to looking it up. It's like school start tomorrow. I'm like, shit. So I literally had to catch the bus. My grandma would not give me a bus ticket. I still hope that back to this day because I didn't have no money. But then find a way down to the school. I took the test and I scored high. Like I scored extremely high in math. Like I was always smart. I just didn't apply myself. And they were like, yo, have you ever thought about being an accountant? And I'm like, no. And I look up like the glass door, what's the entry level salary? And I'm like, yeah, I want to be an accountant. Like, that's what it is. Math, numbers. Okay, cool. I'm going to do that. So then I just signed up and I started the day before the first day. I signed up for college.
Wow, that is a dope story. So let's talk about your first deal, because that's always like the defining moment when you get into this game. So tell me, like, how did you even think about getting your first deal? Did you go through courses like I did, or was it something else? And just walk me through that whole situation.
Okay. So when that happened with that tax return, when I kind of got into real estate, that was like January, February. In the whole time period, I began to binge listen to
2020?
2019. I began to binge listen to podcasts. So that was kind of my education. So I would hear mad other people, different stories. I can't even name all the people I listen to, but I know a lot of people from the podcast. So I began to binge listen to everybody talk about how they started, where they started from, their circumstances, which were, similar to mine, and they were Black and brown people. So I was like, damn, we really can really do it like that. So around October that year, I was saving and trying to put away. And I'm like, okay, well, if I wait till June, I'll have this amount. Because like you said, a lot of times when you're buying your first property, you think you got to have this big lottery number in order to be ready. And that's kind of not really the reality of it. So I was giving myself 6 more months, and I was kind of talking to my guy, Jamal. He already had a couple properties too. And he was like, nah, bro, you ready now? And I'm kind of like, nah, no, I'm not. I need at least this number. If I ain't got this number, the building gonna come down. So the following month, my realtor hit me and was like, hey, there's this 3-unit property. He knew the guy. He sold a property for him. It's like, it's off market. It's in this area. You want to come see it? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. And, I was even nervous walking through it. I'm like, man, this is wild. You open the door, it's grown people with kids. Like, it's like, this is kind of crazy. Like, I'm an accountant. I sit in the cubicle all day. I don't even talk to people. So that part was kind of wild. And then when we got home, I kind of did the numbers and I'm like, okay, I'm cash flowing already. Like, okay, I guess let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up getting an accepted offer. I remember it was like a Saturday at like 8:00. I was just chilling with my lady. And then my realtor called and told me, I'm like, we got the house. And it was like, oh, snaps. Well, what's next? And I ended up getting my inspection back. And the house was built in 1907. And it had all kind of stuff on the inspection, this and that, the electrical panel and this and that, and crack in the concrete right here. It's like the most detailed inspection I ever read in my life. I'm like, yo, what is this? Like, how much is that? He said crack and wear, that's like 20 grand, right? Like, I got all kind of numbers going in my head because when you haven't been through something, you would tend to assume the worst out of every scenario.
Yes.
It's like, oh, the electrical, oh, that gotta be like at least 9,000. It's like, nah, bro, it's just a light bulb. Like, go get a light bulb and replace that and you'll be good. But you're gonna assume the worst because you've never been through it. So I
Yeah.
almost pulled out like 3 different times where I was like, yo, F it. I don't want that house. I'm gonna just live my life. This real estate stuff is crazy. I ain't got no people behind me. So it's just like one of them. But I ended up doing it. So I closed January 2nd, 2020. I literally left work on my break to go close, which I don't know what was going through my mind.
What?
Yeah, I left on my break like 12. I scheduled the closing for 12:30. I'm taking my break at 12. I'm signing these papers. I'm going back to work at 1 o'clock.
Or hilarious.
So I get there. It's like mad papers. I don't even know what I'm signing 2 minutes into it. Like it could have said you signing your life away and give all your possessions to so and so, and I would have signed it because I was just ready to go. So we get done with that. I get my keys, and they're like, "Yo, you got your leases ready to get to the tenants?" And I'm like, "No,
What?
I do not." And they were like, "You gotta go and get the leases." I'm like, "Where that's at?" It was all the way across town. So now it's like 12:45. I'm like, okay, we're gonna get these leases. And then there was a lot of paperwork that was like, well, you got to fill it out, what you want to charge for rent before you give it to them. So I'm like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, I'm going to Target to get pens and shit. I'm like, yo, I call my job. I'm like, yo, I ain't feeling good. I'm not gonna be there the rest of today. Cause I was just like, this is a whole lot. So I'm literally like in Target filling out a lease, like, okay, tenant, okay, I think it's one person. You know what I mean? Crazy. Just to go back to the building. So I'm filling this stuff out, nervous as hell. I'm just grabbing forms. So I end up going there and the tenant is on me. Like, they're like, you raising rent? And I'm like, I don't, my name's Tramaine. Like, you know what I mean? I haven't even introduced myself to you and you already on me. So I'm like, no, I'm not raising rents for right now. You know, I just want you guys to be comfortable. I'm trying to reassure them. So we put a lease on. She's like, oh, okay. I have the check ready for you. I'm like, oh yeah, let me take that. That's my job. So I end up taking a rent. I end up picking up rent for 2 or 3 people because it's a triplex.
Okay.
So I ended up taking the rent for 2 or 3 people. I got in my car. They could have been playing the wackest song on the radio. It was fire at that point because I'm like, yo, I just got like, this is crazy. Like they just paid me. Like I never knew this person a day in my life. They just paid me. Like it was crack from that point, man.
Wow, that is an amazing story. That is so funny that you thought you would handle all of that on
Oh
your
yeah,
lunch.
I'm on my break. Like I'll be right back. I'll be back in 30 minutes. Stay right here. I'll be right back. I left my charger there too. And I'm like, oh damn, I don't even got my damn charger. Thought I was going back to work.
Hilarious. So, did you have any issue with the tenants knowing that you were the landlord, or did you want to be anonymous? Like, how did you even think that that whole thing would go?
I didn't have a choice because on the showings they were there. So it's like
Uh,
realtor. Oh, who's the realtor? And he raised his hand like, oh, okay, this got to be the buyer. So they're like, oh yeah, you're the guy. Like, yeah, I'm the guy. But the second month, so mind you, when I bought them, all 3 units were occupied. So I'm like, okay, I'll have time to get into this. I'll collect rent for a couple months, and then I'll figure out what I want to do because it had to be owner occupied. So I want to figure out who I want to kick out.
oh,
So the second month, the highest paying tenant downstairs didn't pay, and she wasn't answering her phone. So it was the 6th of February. I left on my job on my break, like I always do, to go over there and knock on her door and kind of see what's going on. So I go there and I'm like, yo, what's going on? You haven't answered the phone. I'm like, are you okay? And I really want to know, like, okay, where's the rent? But of course, she's okay. I'm like, are you okay? Some. And she's like, I'm moving out. And I'm
just
like,
like,
huh? You doing what? She's like, oh, I'm moving out. It's an emergency. I'm like, when are you moving out? And she's like, oh, tomorrow. I'm like, but on page 6 of the thing you signed, didn't it say that you got to give me 60 days or something? They're like, oh, it's a family emergency. I'll have my thing about tomorrow. Where you want the key? I'm like, hey, you can put it in the mailbox and I'll be here on my break again to come get it. One of those type of things. So I'm driving back to work. I'm like, yo, she's gone. What's going to happen? Like, this is kind of crazy. So the next day, I get off of work. It's the winter. It get dark at like 4:30. So I'm driving to her property. Like, I think she's gone, but we finna see. So I see the keys in the mailbox. I walk inside the property. It's mad dark. Because mind you, there's no living room lights. There's barely a kitchen light. Like it's an older place. So I'm
right.
walking through like, hello. Because you hear those stories about people that's like, they moved out as like a hoarder standing in the corner. You know what I mean? So I'm like, hello, anybody here? Property management and shit like that, like a weirdo. but nobody's saying nothing. So I end up walking the property and I'm like, yo, I gotta fix this property up. Like this don't look good. So I start looking around and then I'm just like, okay, it need paint. Paint, okay. And I told my lady, it's like, okay, we gotta go buy paint. I'm like, okay, let's go buy paint. So for everything I did within the rehab, I did one at a time. Like paint was one, which I never do, but I did it just to say I did it. And then everything else was kind of just like a process. And then I was like, why don't I just live in here since the other 2 units was paying for the mortgage?
Oh, okay. So that's when it became owner occupied, when she left. Okay. Wow, that is a funny story. I remember you talking about the paint and how you said you would never paint ever
Oh
again
no.
in life.
We painted something and I'm like, all right, hey, you ready? Like, let's go. You say he's painting his room today. She's like, oh no, I need 4 more coats. I'm like, coat? What's a coat? And then she's like, you gotta let it dry for 45 minutes. And then I'm like, oh man, I'm not with this, man.
Yeah, that is the worst. I will hire out for that for
Man.
sure. So I know that you have 3 properties. So how did you jump from the 1 to the 2 and the 3? And was it easy to acquire those next properties since you already have some leverage in terms of an asset, and 2, just the experience that you already had from buying your first one?
Right. So then after that, after I got my first one, I told my lady, I'm like, yo, you should try to get you a duplex. Like, because before when I talked to her about it, she kind of be like, yeah, I don't know. We're gonna have to see. But sometimes people have to see somebody else do it to realize like, yo, it can actually happen. You have to see me do it and we paint our unit and fix it up. It's like, wow, this is kind of dope. I do want my own. So she ended up finding a property. It was for sale from the bank. And she ended up getting it. It was on the market for like a year. It was in a good area. I guess nobody was looking towards it. And it was a HUD property where they would reimburse you for the fixtures that the property needed. And they would just estimate it. So they estimated the cost to fix it up to be like 12,000, but we ended up fixing it, which was factored into the loan. But we ended up fixing it up for like 6 grand. So she ended up getting back, double what we ended up putting into the property. So our first thoughts were to just finish the house hack and then move into the upper unit because it's a duplex, but she ended up getting pregnant. So we ended up just leaving that unit vacant for like the year process because we don't want to violate any codes. And she was still staying there technically, her mail was going there. But yeah, it was one of those processes. So that's how we got the second property, which is the duplex.
So she went through FHA to get this?
Yep.
Oh, okay. And for the first one, did you pay cash? Was that a hard money?
Conventional. So that was 5% down.
Okay. So talk about owner occupied, because maybe people don't understand, because you said you wanted to leave it vacant because you didn't want to have any issues with FHA occupancy. So talk.
Okay. So with buying a house owner occupied, you have to live in a unit. Like you're supposed to live in a unit. And we were going to live inside of the unit, but she ended up getting pregnant. So we didn't want to violate any code. So her mail was still going there. That was her address. She was still going there every day. But to satisfy the owner occupant terms of the bank loan, that's kind of what she did for that time.
That's some of the
finance out of it, but
yeah. So physically she's not living there, but she did set up residency, meaning was going there. Probably the water bill is in her name, right?
Yep. She just slept in my place at night.
Right. So that's her property. Are you both on that loan, or it's just her?
Just her.
Okay.
Yep, it's just her. Just her. Yeah, you can have your own building, so if it don't work out, hey, you got a building though.
And then you have a third one. So can you talk about that one?
Okay, so it's a long process between her second building and my third building. So during that process, now the first building I got, it was kind of in a more like suburban area. So I'm trying to get more properties in that area, house hacks. So I'm losing out on a lot of, it's like, if they want 215 for a property, I offer 218 and it gets sold for 220 cash. I'm like, I can't compete with that because I got a loan.
Right.
So I went to phase of that for about 6 months, just losing out on properties. And then I end up finding a 4 unit, which is in another suburb, but it was like 340, but the rents weren't really up there when it comes to the market. So I ended up DJ Envy and flipping NJ Caesar. They have what's called a VIP experience on their seminars, in which I guess it came with like a private jet. You get to fund a private jet, hotel, and you get to go to the seminar with them and get like, I guess, good seats. And just a little backstory, my guy Jamal had went previously. He was telling me, yo, you get the game, like they real deal Holyfield. It ain't like no kind of, iffy stuff. They really give you the game. So I ended up signing up. And mind you, I'm not all the way valid as far as income. It was kind of tight, but I'm like, why not? And that was my first plane flight. So I
Ever?
was about to, yeah, at 27.
Wow.
So I had to fly to New York, and then from New York, the private plane was flying from New York to Orlando. So what happened? So we get out there, and I'm at the end of the plane. First of all, it's a private plane. So first to last is kind of seating, and I get in last because everybody taking pictures, all that little stuff. So then the plane take off. I'm close to the cockpit, like the pilot, right? He can then dap me up. So when he takes off, I can feel it. I'm like, oh no, this is crazy. Envy like, yo, y'all can get up and come talk. I'm like, nah, I'm staying right here, bro, until we get to floating or something, because I'm gonna mess around and fall into one of y'all, and I ain't going for that. So long story short, I was able to ask my questions, like, real estate, all this and that, and they get to ask me about my deal. So mind you, I was in a contract for a 4-unit building in South Milwaukee, which is a suburb, and I was in for like 340.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yo, I'm in real estate, some, and I got this building. It was like, oh, okay, well, what are the numbers? And I'm like, so for 340, these are the rents. And he was like, Caesar was like, nah, that's a bad deal, bro. And I'm crushed. I'm like, huh?
Wow.
He's like, yeah, that's a bad deal. That's a bad deal. And then I get the freestyling alternatives I want to think about, like, yo, what if I just rent out every room like 700 a piece? That's like $8,000 at that point, and all this and that. He's like, listen, you have a gold mine in Milwaukee. You need to focus on those properties, kind of like, in the hood.
Mm-hmm.
So the next day is the actual seminar, and his wife, Jenny, does a whole deal breakdown on the property that was in Milwaukee.
On your property?
No, not
The
my
one.
property, just a property that I drove by in Milwaukee, like in the hood. And I'm just like, what? She's like, we buy it for this much, some. Well, first she started off like, who in here wants to live in Milwaukee? And nobody said nothing. I'm like, yo, all right, relax. We get it. We paid our money. Let's simmer down a little bit. And nobody said nothing, but she got to the property and she brought down the numbers. And I'm like, yo, I kind of felt violated. I'm like, yo, I've been living here for 27, 28 years. And I drove by this property 1,000 times. But somebody that's not even from here sees the value in it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
mind you, I was about a week away from closing. I get back to the hotel room. I call my realtor. I'm like, yo, F that property. I don't care if they want the escrow money. We out. I'm looking at something totally different. I don't even want that property. So I
Wow.
did. That's when I started looking at different kind of properties.
Wow. So did you have a hard time getting out of it?
No,
Did you lose?
I don't think the lady wanted to sell it. I looked and it hasn't been on the market since. So she's one of those people that's been standing there. It was like an owner-occupied building herself. She had been staying there. So I don't think she wants to move. So she was perfectly fine. I got my escrow money back. I'm like, okay, cool.
Wow. That's awesome. So so once you had got the information from Envy and those guys, which they are like the goats and rehabs and all that kind of stuff, you went back home with a different mindset, looking for the gold in the hood, basically, right?
Right. No.
And did you, once you got back?
Yeah, I did.
Find?
I was looking for about a month or two. I ended up finding a property that was for like 60,000. 6 bedrooms, 3 baths. It used to be a 3-unit. It had the potential to be converted back to 3-unit. So I kind of was like, okay, I started looking up what the market rents was, like I teach in my course. And I'm like, okay, I start doing the numbers. I'm like, yo, I'm gonna be able to make what I make off of 2 properties off this one property, borrowing a fifth of the cost. Even though
Wow.
there was work done, need to be done, but it was like once it gets rented out, like you're good.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up buying that property for 60,000.
Wow, that is so dope. So it just goes to show that sometimes, you have to get out your own way to, really capitalize on something, because you was dialed in to get that other property, and you was like even fighting. I'm like, no, this could work. It could work. I could rent it by the room. It's gonna work. And it's like, no. So it's good that they redirected you and that you was able to, really hone in on what you were looking for. And it seemed like that was a lick to get that property for 60,000. So that's dope. That's real dope. So so you have three properties. So what's next in terms of your real estate goals?
Just the backstory. One of the reasons I got into real estate is because me and my lady, we would go to these open houses, and open houses are like new construction homes. And it would be like awed, like, man, this is so nice, something. They'll tell the price, and then what we would do is we would go to home and we would calculate how much money we have to make to afford the house.
Mm-hmm.
And every time we get there, it'd be sad, like, yo, this house is 580. It's talking about 273. Man, I ain't, you know what I mean? It was one of those, like, I can't afford the house. They keep saying that I won't. And it was like, I kept projecting my salary, like, well, if I get promoted 3 times and I make this and you make that. And it was one of those things where it's like, I'll have to stay on my job for like 15 years and get consistently promoted, her too, in order for us to afford our ideal house.
Right.
So looking at it now into perspective, it's like, now we look at them same houses, it's like, yo, you know, our rental income covers that. Like, we can have this pay for the whole house, and we can still have our jobs to invest and acquire other property.
Yeah, that's the magic of it. Because, you know, until you get into real estate, you don't even think in that way. You just think about, okay, we want to get this house. How are we going to do it? Are we going to get, you know, we're going to drive Uber on the side? You know, what are we going to do? But when you get into real estate, you think about this asset could pay for that single family. And that is such a game changer. So that's dope. That's really dope.
Real estate income allowed me to look at everything I desired in my life and divide it by properties. So there's a car I want, a couple cars I want. You know, I might look at a Rolls Royce, I might look at a Range Rover, like, yo, okay, what's that, 1,600 a month? Okay, that's 2 duplexes. I don't look at it like, how am I gonna get 1,600 a month? I don't look at it like from a paycheck perspective. I look at it from a property perspective.
Exactly. So that's like the biggest part. If anybody can take away from this podcast, is think about it in terms of how can I acquire the asset to pay for the thing that I want. Because not only do you have the cash flow that's paying for the asset, you now have something that you're getting tax benefits, you're getting appreciation. Like, there's so many other benefits to having property, just rather than just the cash flow, which is huge, but you know, it's so multi-pronged.
That is so huge. And just for the people that's listening, I'm gonna just walk you through an example. So on my property, my first one, I cash flow about $1,000 a month, which is about $12,000 a year. However, when I do my taxes, only about maybe 2,500 of that is taxable, because I have what's called depreciation, maintenance, repairs and maintenance. I get to write that off, or any kind of capital improvements, mortgage interest. So the thing I learned was that, you know, you have to make twice what you make, or 3 times what you make in real estate, to make that at your job and take that home. That's the power of it.
Exactly. That was dope. So so let's go. I know that you have a course. What made you create the course?
I was actually talking to you, Zena, and a lot of times we was kind of going back and forth as far as just sharing like what you going through or experiencing as a landlord. And I was saying like my solution to certain things, and she just was like, yo, why don't you create a course like how to be a landlord? Like, I buy it. And I'm just like, yeah, why don't I? Like, you know, because prior to that, I had kind of been trying to do bookkeeping on my own for others. And the thing I found was that I'm selling everybody on solutions and expertise, but it's like I wasn't doing that myself. Like, I was telling clients prior, like, yo, create a product, you do hair, create a course on doing hair, and this and that. Then when you said the light bulb went up, like, damn, well, why don't I? So the next day I took mine to Best Buy. I bought a MacBook for like 1,300, and I just got the YouTube and stuff, like how to record a course. Okay, what you need? Okay, PowerPoint. Okay, what I'm gonna talk about, and just figuring it out.
That is so dope. I love that you was like, bet. You was like, say less. I'm going to drop it. I think you gave me an exact date, and you hit that date. And I was like, he is so impressive. And I'm sitting here talking about, oh, I'm going to build me a course, and I still haven't done it. So you are totally my inspiration to get my course done. So what's next for you in terms of just your overall business, your investing, your courses? Like, what's next for you?
Man, the sky. I don't feel like nothing is the limit as far as for me when it comes to this stuff. I'm not gonna lie. Producing more content. We got the pod going, of course. The course for sure, tap in if you a landlord. I mean, if you somebody with a job that's thinking about being a landlord, you want to know what it's like. I kind of talk about that in my course. And just growing all the seeds that I planted. Like, one thing I realized a long time ago is majority of people don't get rich in their 20s. Like, it's very hard, it's very suddenly for it to come. But what you can do is plant the seeds that will allow it to grow into riches and when you're in your 30s. So that was kind of my whole focus for my 20s. Like, let me just plant stuff that I hope to grow in my 30s. So it's like, you got the podcast. Okay, let's keep that consistent. You got the properties, you got the course. So it's like, hopefully for me, for the future, is just, growing the seeds that I planted.
So I think we're going to wrap it up, but I just wanted to know how is work now that you see the potential for how things are going with your cash flow and with your course and stuff like that. Like, do you just, yeah, I want you to tell me that story.
I cuss way more at work now. I cuss way more at work now. Like before, stuff wouldn't throw me off, but now I'd be like, any little thing is like, man, listen, like, you watch Everybody Hate Chris?
Yes.
Remember how like the white used to be like, man, I don't need this. I got 2 jobs. My man got 2. Now I'll be like, man, I don't need this, man. I got 3 properties. Like, relax. So my psyche at work has definitely changed. One thing you got to know though is that no matter how my psyche changed towards the job, I still need the job.
Yeah.
Like, let's not make no fool of it. Sometimes people get these properties, they have a good year or something, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't need a job. I fired my job. I fired your boss. Fire your boss. And it's like, your job is your first investor. Like, let's not forget that. Like, if I had a job, I probably wouldn't be able to get the first property.
Exactly.
Course and content.
For sure. And a lot of people, they forget about that. It's so much easier to buy property when you have a W-2 and you have 2 years of employment history. Even a millionaire that got $1 million in the bank, it is so much harder for them to buy property. So it's just like having a job is like the cheat code to getting to the wealth, because you need, that paper trail in order for the underwriter to be comfortable to give you something. So I'm so glad you said that. Like, the job is the investor.
Yeah. And being an accountant, I feel like it's kind of cheat code to business, because I've seen and worked with all kind of businesses. Because when you do taxes, you're able to see a year-end summary of businesses. So I see what you did in January. I see what you did in April. I see what you did with your payroll. I see how you're not putting away no reserves, even though you got this high payroll. So it's like, during COVID, that stuff kind of came up, where it was like a lot of people you thought was well off was calling us saying, hey, we need a PPP loan, or we need this, we need that, we can't afford this. Can you do it for me? So it kind of taught me about a perspective on just having money put up, honestly.
Yeah. And COVID really highlighted for me these big companies that have been in business for years that were going out of business because, like you said, they didn't have no reserves. Everything was like smoke and mirrors. But
I had a guy who had he had 3 bars, and prior to COVID, he was kind of check by check, like, okay, hey, your payroll's due Friday, transfer the money, and just enough to cover payroll Thursday night. And when COVID happened, he couldn't make payroll. And even if you apply for a PPP loan, there's a process between you applying and you getting it, especially at first, because everybody's lining up to get them. So he had like a 3-month process in which there was no money coming in because it was shut down. He didn't have no reserves, and he had to let go a whole bunch of employees because he couldn't afford to make payroll. I think he ended up closing like 2 of his bars, or even 1 of them. But I know he shut down a bar at least. That's taught me the importance of saving money. And my second story I'm gonna tell you is I once did taxes for a couple. One was a dentist, the other one was like a doctor. And between both of them, they made about 1.1 million. And it's like dope, right? You make $1 million. That's dope. So I end up finishing the taxes, and they end up owing like $25,000. And I just told my manager, like, hey, they owe $25,000. You can have them write a check, some, no biggie. And he's like, oh, well, we're gonna have to talk about that. I'm like, what you mean? Talk about what? He was like, well, they're trying to find the ways to come up with the money now for it. And I'm like, come up with the money? They made $1.1 million. What you mean come up with the money? He was like, yeah, but they make $1 million, but they're check to check.
Wow.
And I was like, huh? And that's one thing he told me. He's like, majority of $1 million earning clients he work with are check to check. So that just kind of just taught me, when I set up my infrastructure, always have reserves, always have stuff put away, because you never know when everything gonna just stop and dry up.
Right. And that also speaks to lifestyle creep. As your salary doesn't mean that your lifestyle needs to meet it. You can still live on the salary you had previously. That's huge, because the money that you have, the difference of the old pay and the new pay, that can be something that goes towards an investment. That can be something that goes into, ETF. So lifestyle creep is huge, because people, they're like, oh my God, I make $500,000, and they spend $500,000. And it's just like, oh my God, you're hustling backwards. But you don't know what you don't know until you get the information, right? So But that's crazy for somebody to make 1.1 million and don't even have enough to pay taxes.
Trust me, as an accountant, it's like can't nothing surprise me. So when you ever hear about somebody, oh, you can't believe it, he filed for bankruptcy, it's like, no, I can believe it for sure. I believe it.
So what is your biggest takeaway about how you got into real estate, and what would be your biggest pieces of advice for someone that wants to follow in your footsteps?
The biggest takeaway I got from real estate is that, by little, you really building by building is really changing your life. Like each building I have can take care of an expense I have in my life monthly, which, makes my life way easier. And my biggest advice I would give to people when it comes to real estate is just, you got to treat it like a cold water pool, man. Like, as a kid, I don't mess with water. I can't even swim today. I'm gonna keep it a bean with you. So a lot of times you go to the pool, it's like you might dip your foot in there, you might put your hand in there to see the temperature of your arm, but it's like you gotta just dive in there, fam. You're gonna be doing that your whole time. So it's like it's the same thing with real estate. Like, bro, just dive in. Once you dive in, you're used to the water, the temperature don't mean nothing to you. Same thing with real estate. You can ask me 1,000 questions. Hey, bro, we got your first building, how is this and that? But it's like until you dive in it, you're not gonna really know what it genuinely feels like.
Exactly, because every experience, even like overarching, it's the same. Like you get a loan and you close on a property and all that, but all the minutia in between is totally different. So what you went through with your properties, I didn't go through, but what I went through, you didn't go through. So you do have to get into it so you can experience your own experience. And for me, one of the biggest takeaways is you have to be a problem solver. You can't be one of those people that drown in a teardrop. Like as soon as something happens, you're like, oh my God, I knew it was gonna happen. I give up. So yeah. Well, this was awesome. I love to hear your story. You always crack me up. Like every time we talk, I just be in stitches. But you always come with the facts and the tips and the heat, and I just love it. So I think we're gonna wrap it up. What do you think?
Cool, man. Yeah, I'm with that. I'm with that. For everybody that's listening, like I said, you can follow me at 9to5landlord.
And I'm Zena. You can follow me at Zena Dixon Inc.
All right, man. Y'all be blessed.
All right.